Senator McConnell on his side of the aisle. And sadly, it is a moment in time when a nominee for the Supreme Court wants to bring to us a political way of thinking, a legal way of thinking, I should say, a legal way of thinking, which I believe is inconsistent with progress in this country when it comes to human rights and civil rights. Under originalist theory, we may never have had Brown versus Board of Education and the other cases I mentioned. What a loss for this great nation. That's not what we need on the court. We need people on the court who are realists, who will look at the law and the Constitution in real terms and not ideological terms. And the notion that this justice is being hurried before us in the hopes that she will eliminate the Affordable Care Act in the midst of a pandemic certainly is worth noting. It's one of the reasons, one of many of the reasons, that I'll be voting no on Amy Coney Barrett with her nomination to the Supreme Court, and I yield the floor.
Ooh.
Carolina.
Thank you. As chairman of the Judiciary Committee, it's my honor to speak on the floor about this nomination, which I think is historic in many fashions, all positive from my point of view. We have before the committee the nomination of Judge Barrett, who currently sits on the 7th Judicial Circuit. She is one of the most impressive people I've ever met. 2 days of hearings, answering every question thrown to her with grace and judicial demeanor. I think should be the gold standard for every other nominee. But I want to thank my staff, Lee Holmes, the director. Lee's done such a great job of, the Judiciary Committee has done a lot of things, some contentious, some not, but I want to thank Lee for shepherding this nomination and the fine work he's done. Mike Fragozio, Mike, I got your first name right anyway, just outstanding. You've done a terrific job. The permanent nominations unit for the Judiciary Committee includes Laura Miller, Raja Churchill, Tim Rodriguez, Watson Horner, Akil, Ragasekar, don't want to butcher your name. All have worked incredibly hard for 135 Article III judges, not just this one. In addition, Lucas Croslow joined my staff to lead the team of special counsels assisting with the Barrett nomination. That included Sid D-A-D-H-I-C-H, Jay Favell, Abby Holstein, Eric Palmer, Robert Smith. They went through the entire record presented by Judge Barrett to make sure we would be prepared for the confirmation process. Law clerks Matt Simpson, Emily Hall, Megan Karen, and Peter Singal. I'd like to thank the Judiciary Committee's press secretary, Taylor Reed, did a great job, Taylor, along with George Hartzman, as well as by our Deputy Staff Director, Joe Keeley. Bottom line, all of them worked really hard. You made history. You should be proud. You can tell your grandkids about all this. Well done. To my Democratic colleagues, I know you didn't like what we did, but I do appreciate the way you conducted yourself in the hearing. It wasn't a circus. I think you challenged the judge appropriately during her time. We had 4 days of hearings. We heard from a variety of people about Judge Barrett. In terms of the process, it was well within what we've done in the past. Every Judiciary Committee markup regarding a Supreme Court justice, we've done the same thing. First day is opening statements, 2 days of questions, and the final day input from outside groups, and that's what we're able to do here. So she went through the process like every other nominee since I've been here. But let me just say this to my Democratic colleagues, it's not about the process. You find ways to make sure that most of you can't vote for anybody we nominate. And it really does break my heart. Robert, 78-22, that was sort of the norm. I think Alito got 96 and Ginsburg got 97. Maybe I got the numbers right. I can't remember who got what, but one got 96, one got 97. Used not to be this way, Senator Sullivan. Used to be different. We looked at the qualifications, said, okay, you're good to go. You're a person of integrity, you're smart, you're well-rounded, you're knowledgeable in the law. You may have a different philosophy than I have, but we understand elections matter. And everybody accepted the election outcome. Those days are over. Absolutely, completely over, destroyed. There's nobody any Republican president can ever nominate I think is not going to face a hard time. That's too bad. That's the way it is. Alito, 58-42. Judge Alito, well known on our side of the aisle, the kind of person you'd be looking at to promote to the Supreme Court. When President Bush nominated him, well within the mainstream. Roberts, Alito, well known in the conservative world of being very bright Court of Appeals judges that any Republican president would be looking at to put on the court if they ever had an opportunity. No difference between Alito and Roberts, but Alito went through hell, but he made it, and he got 58 votes. So then along comes President Obama. He gets 2 picks, Sotomayor, 68 votes to 31. I think she deserved more, but 68 is pretty darn good. I was glad to vote for her. I saw that she was qualified. Then we had Elena Kagan, 63 votes. So you can see the trend here. Both of Obama nominees, 68-63. And I thought Elena Kagan was highly qualified. Different judicial philosophy. She was a dean of law school at Harvard, but worked for the Solicitor General's office. Both of them have been with the liberal side of the court most every case, but not all. I'm not surprised with the way they've decided cases. I think they're tremendously well qualified women should be sitting on the court. That's exactly who you would expect a Democrat president to pick, Sotomayor and Kagan. So now we come back. Trump wins. Nobody thought he would win, including me. I voted for somebody in 2016. I wouldn't know if he walked through the door, Evan McMullen. I think I met him once. I had my challenge for President Trump during the 2016 primary. He beat me like a drum. I accepted my defeat. I've been trying to help him ever since, and I think he's done a really good job of sending to the Senate highly qualified judges. He's gotten input from a lot of different people, the Federalist Society, you name it, a lot of different people. Gorsuch and Kavanaugh have one thing in common. They were in my top 3 recommendations. Any Republican president looking to nominate somebody to the Supreme Court would be looking at Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. These are not exotic picks. They're in the mold of Sotomayor and Kagan in terms of qualifications. So what happened? Gorsuch was the first attempt at a partisan filibuster. We had 3 votes to get 60, and we couldn't, so we changed the rules for the Supreme Court like they changed the rules in 2013 for the District Court and Court of Appeals. If we had not, Gorsuch wouldn't be on the court, and to say he's not qualified is a joke, is an insult to him, and says more about you than it does Judge Gorsuch. If you can't see he's qualified, you're blinded by your hatred of Trump. So he made it, but we had to change the rules. Hated to do it, but had to do it because in any other time, Gorsuch would have gotten the same type votes as Roberts because he's just highly qualified. Then comes along Kavanaugh. Nothing about process there. There's no process argument. Right at the very end, the last day of the hearing, when we thought it was all over, you give us a letter that you'd had for weeks, an allegation against the judge. It'd been nice to share it with him so he could tell his side of the story, but you chose not to do that. You had it pre-cooked with the press outlets, and everything blew up. So all of us on the committee had to decide what to do. I sat down with Senator Flake and Senator Collins, and we felt like the allegations had to be heard. They're made. And I know a lot of people on our side thought it was unfair, dirty pool, but we had the opportunity to have the hearing. And the rest is history. It was high drama. All I can say that something happened to the person who accused Judge Kavanaugh, but I don't believe Judge Kavanaugh had anything to do with it. This was a party in high school. Dr. Ford couldn't remember where it was, who was there. The people that were said to be there said they don't remember anything like it happened. Judge Kavanaugh hasn't lived a life like being described. He was accused by 4 or 5 people. 3 of them actually made it up. I hope some of them go to jail for lying to the committee and the country. And they were trying to make him a rapist and drugging women in high school. And what was his annual all about? It was the most sickening episode in my time in the Senate. They were hell-bent on destroying this guy's life, based on a bunch of manufactured lies and evidence that wouldn't get you out of the batter's box in any court of law in the land. And here we are, 50 to 48. And what I saw there was a turning point for me. We cannot continue to do this. You're going to drive good people away, and I'm hoping that the Barrett hearings, which were far more civil, far more traditional, will be a turning point. Because I don't know who the next president will be, but there'll be an opening, I'm sure, in the court. I'm hoping that the next hearing is more like Barrett and less like Kavanaugh, no matter who wins. Now, Barrett, I understand the concern about the process. This is the latest we've ever confirmed somebody. You've heard all the arguments about when the presidents of one party and the senates of a different party. You've had one confirmation in 100-something years that most of the time when the presidents of the same party as the Senate, they go through. I understand. The bottom line is we gave her the same type hearing that Alito, Sotomayor, Kagan, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh had. My Democratic colleagues showed up at the hearing. They participated. They pushed her hard, but I don't think they went across the line. They decided not to show up to markup. I hate that, but that's the way it is. I would like to spend a few minutes talking about the person who's going on the court in about an hour. If you're looking for somebody that a Republican would be picking, regardless of the process, it would be Judge Barrett. She would be on anybody's list. And I listened to Senator Durbin, who is a good friend, and we'll work on whatever comes our way after the election. I find that he's somebody you can work on hard things like immigration with, but his description of Judge Barrett simply doesn't pass scrutiny. Trying to make a character of this person that doesn't exist. There's nothing exotic about Judge Barrett. She's very mainstream in our world. All I can say is that after 2 days of hearings, the American people, by 51%, which is pretty hard to figure in this country, you get 51% agreement on anything, felt like she should be going on the court. So here's what Dean O'Hara said, Dean of Notre Dame Law School, who hired Amy Barrett to be a professor at Notre Dame. I have only communicated with this august committee on 2 occasions. The first was 10 years ago when I wrote a strong letter in support of now Justice Elena Kagan, whose term as Dean of Harvard Law School overlapped with my own. The second is today, introducing and endorsing Amy Coney Barrett in equally strong terms. Some might find these recommendations to be in juxtaposition, but I find them entirely consistent. And to anybody wondering about Judge Barrett, I would highly recommend that you look at the ABA's recommendations and the process they used to find her well qualified. Not one person uttered a negative word about her character, according to the ABA. Someone said to the ABA, the myth is real. She is a staggering academic mind. She is incredibly honest and forthright. She's exactly who you think she is. Nothing about her is fake. She is good, she's decent, she's selfless, she's sincere. She's an exemplary of a living and integrated life. The standing committee would have been hard-pressed to come up with any conclusion other than that Judge Barrett has demonstrated professional competence that is exceptional. Then they had a committee to look at her writings, all of her writings. They accepted input from 944 people that she's interacted in her professional life, not one negative comment. So forget about what politicians say about Judge Barrett. Forget about what people who don't recognize President Trump as being a legitimate president say about Judge Barrett. Forget about what I say if you want to. Look at what people who work with her said that are in the law business, that know her individually, have worked with her as a judge, as a professor, and they conclude without any doubt she is one of the most gifted people to ever be nominated to the Supreme Court. There's nothing exotic about Judge Barrett. She's going on to the court in about an hour. That's exactly where she needs to be. She's the type person who's lived a life worthy of being nominated. She's the type person that's worthy of receiving a large vote in the Senate, but she won't get it. She's not going to get one Democratic vote. And you're right off to the process if you want to. That's fine. But what about the others? All I can say is that we're going to have an election here in about a week. And whatever happens, I'm going to acknowledge the winner when it's all said and done. It may go to the Supreme Court, I don't know. But there'll be a day that we know who won. And I'm going to accept those results, and I'm going to do with the next president what I've tried to do with this one and every other one. Try to find a way forward on things that are hard, keep the country moving forward. So to the majority leader and the minority leader, it's a tough place around here now. This too shall pass. But this is about Judge Barrett. This is about her time, her moment. She's done everything you would expect of her. She's exceeded every challenge put in her way. She's impressed everybody she's worked with. She has impressed the country. She's going onto the court because that's where she deserves to be. As to us in the Senate, maybe down the road we can get back to the way we used to be. I don't know, but I do know this. There's nothing exotic about Judge Barrett. She's as mainstream as it gets from our side of the aisle. And when it comes to people outside of politics looking at her, it was universal, highly qualified, highly competent, ready to serve this country as social justice of the Supreme Court. And my last thought, it's hard to be a conservative person of color. That is a very difficult road to hoe in a modern American politics. My good friend Tim Scott is a great voice for conservatism. And Tim, a lot of things said about Tim, it's said about nobody else on our side of the aisle. And he's tough, he can handle it. Same for conservative women. Judge Barrett did not abandon her faith. She embraces it, but she said, I embrace my faith, but as a judge, it will not be the rule of Amy. It will be the rule of law. It will be the facts. It will be the law, an outcome dictated by the law, not by anything I personally believe. But I will say this, for the young conservative women out there who are pro-life and embrace your faith, there's a seat at the table for you. This is historic. This nomination is different. This is a breakthrough for conservative young women. And I was honored to be the chairman of the committee that reported out Judge Barrett to the floor of the Senate. And I'm going to be honored to cast my vote to put her on the Supreme Court exactly where she deserves to be. I yield.
Mr. President,
Minority Leader.
today, Monday, October 26, 2020, will go down as one of the darkest days in the 231-year history of the United States Senate. Let the record show that tonight, the Republican Senate majority decided to thwart the will of the people and confirm a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court in the middle of a presidential election after more than 60 million Americans have voted. Let the record show that tonight, the Republican majority will break 231 years of precedent and become the first majority to confirm a Supreme Court justice this close to Election Day. And let the record show that tonight, the Republican majority will make a mockery of its own stated principle that the American people deserve a voice in the selection of Supreme Court justices, completing the partisan theft of 2 seats on the Supreme Court using completely contradictory rationales. And let the record show that the American people their lives and rights and freedoms will suffer the consequences of this nomination for a generation. This entire debate can be summed up in 3 lies propagated by the Republican majority and one great, terrible truth. The first lie is that the Republican majority is being consistent in following its own standard. What rubbish. After refusing a Democratic nominee to the Supreme Court because an election was 8 months away, they will confirm a Republican nominee before an election that is 8 days away. What's Leader McConnell's excuse? He claims that the principle of not confirming justices in presidential years only applies when there's divided government. But this is what Leader McConnell said after Justice Scalia died. The American people should have a voice in the selection of their next Supreme Court justice. That's all he said. He didn't say that the American people should have a voice, but only when there's divided government. No, the last bit is ex post facto. If this were really about divided government all along, Republican senators would not have promised on the record to follow their own standard if the situation was reversed. I want you to use my words against me, said the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. If there's a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say Lindsey Graham said, let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination. So the claim by the leader that this is consistent with their own principle, please. Rather than accept the consequences of its own words and deeds, the Republican majority is lighting its credibility on fire. This hypocritical 180-degree turn is spectacularly obvious to the American people. The second lie is that the Republican majority is justified because of Democratic actions on judicial nominations in the past. The Republican leader claims that his majority's actions are justified by all the bad things Democrats did years ago. He claims that every escalation of significance in judicial debates was made by Democrats. But in his tortured, convoluted history lesson, Leader McConnell left out a whole bunch of chapters. He omitted that Republicans bottled up more than 60 judicial nominees by President Clinton, refusing them even a hearing. He made no reference to the decision by Republican senators to hold open 14 appellate court seats in the 1990s so that a Republican president could fill them. Instead, a tactic Republicans would revisit under President Obama when Republicans used partisan filibusters to block his nominees to the D.C. Circuit. At the time, Republican senators, including my colleague from Kentucky, amazingly accused President Obama of trying to pack the court by the mere act of nominating judges to vacancies of the Second Circuit. What a hypocritical double standard, which appears to be endemic in Leader McConnell's recounting of history. And on top of it all, the leader has asked the Senate to play a blame game that dates all the way back to 1987, pointing to a 3-minute speech by Senator Kennedy about Robert Bork as the original sin in the judicial wars. Seriously, that's what he said. Because one Democrat gave one 3-minute speech that Republicans didn't like, Leader McConnell can steamroll the minority to confirm a justice in the middle of election. Imagine trying to explain to someone, sorry, I have to burn down your house because of something one of your friends said about one of my friends 33 years ago. That's how absurd and obnoxious this game has gotten. That's how unjustifiable the majority's actions are, how flimsy their excuses have become. The leader's final argument boils down to, but you started it, a declaration you'd sooner hear in the schoolyard than on the floor of the United States Senate. And the third, and perhaps the greatest lie, is that the Republican majority is confirming Judge Barrett solely on the basis of her qualifications, not based on her views on the issues. My colleagues insist that Judge Barrett should be confirmed on her credentials alone. That's all they talk about. They don't talk about her views on the issues, only qualifications. Well, this canard is about as apparent as a glass door. Everyone can see right through it. What's the real reason Republicans are so desperate to rush Judge Barrett onto the Supreme Court? Of course it's not because of her qualifications. If my Republican friends truly believed that the only thing that mattered about a judicial candidate is their qualifications, then Merrick Garland would be sitting on the Supreme Court right now. If the Republican leader truly believed that judicial appointments were about qualifications, and qualifications alone, Judge Garland would be Justice Garland right now. Judge Garland was among the most qualified candidates ever to be nominated to the Supreme Court. No Republican senator has disputed that. But they didn't want Judge Garland on the bench. They do want Judge Barrett. They subjected Judge Garland to an unprecedented partisan blockade. But they're erecting a monument to hypocrisy to rush Judge Barrett onto the bench. Why? It's not because she's more qualified than Judge Garland was. What's the difference between Barrett and Garland? The difference is not qualifications, but views. We know that. We all know that. Health care, a woman's rights, a woman's right to choose, gun safety, you name it. It's not because the far right wants Judge Barrett's views on the court, but it's because the far right wants Judge Barrett's views on the court, but not Judge Garland's. The truth is, this nomination is part of a decades-long effort to tilt the judiciary to the far right, to accomplish through the courts what the radical right and their allies, Senate Republicans, could never accomplish through Congress. Senate Republicans failed to repeal the Affordable Care Act, so President Trump and Republican attorneys general are suing to eliminate the law in court. Republicans would never dare to attempt to repeal Roe v. Wade in Congress, so they pass onerous laws in state legislatures that they control to drive that right to the point of near extinction and then provoke the Supreme Court to review Roe v. Wade. The far right has never held a majority on the court to limit Roe v. Wade or Griswold, but if Judge Barrett becomes Justice Barrett, it very well might. And if you're looking for some hard numbers to prove that the political right considers ideology and not just qualifications, consider this. Under Justice Roberts, there have been 80 cases, 80, decided by a 5-4 majority, in which the 5 justices nominated by Republican presidents came down on one side, and the 4 justices nominated by Democratic presidents came down on the other. 80 cases, exactly the same majority, calling balls and strikes, and in an amazing coincidence, all the Republican nominated justices think it's a strike, and all the Democratic ones think it's a ball, or vice versa. It would be the most remarkable coincidence in the history of mathematics if 9 justices, simply calling balls and strikes, exhibited the same split in the exact same configuration 80 times. We all know what the game is here, so stop pretending. Stop pretending there aren't entire organizations dedicated to advancing far-right judges. Stop pretending that the political right doesn't spend millions of dollars to prop up the far-right Federalist Society and support certain judicial candidates because they only want qualified judges. No, they want to systematically and permanently tilt the courts to the far right. So does Judge Barrett have views on legal issues? You bet she does. And that brings me to the one great and terrible truth about this nomination. The American people will suffer the consequences of Judge Barrett's far right, out of the mainstream views for generations. Judge Barrett came before the Judiciary Committee and refused to answer nearly any question of substance. That's the new game at the hearings. She would not answer questions about health care. She would not say whether voter intimidation is illegal. She would not say if she thought Medicare and Social Security were constitutional. She could not even offer platitudes in responses to questions about the peaceful transfer of power, and refused to say if climate change was real. It's not because Judge Barrett isn't allowed to answer these questions. It's because she knows how unfavorable her views on the issues might sound to the American people. But the thing is, we do know how Judge Barrett thinks. She views certain rights, like the right to privacy, through a pinhole. She was closely affiliated with organizations who advocated the outright repeal of Roe v. Wade. But she views other rights, like the right to keep and bear arms, as almost infinitely expansive. She once authored a dissent arguing the federal government does not have the authority to ban all felons from owning guns. Only a few hours ago, the Republican senator from Missouri proudly declared from the Senate floor that Judge Barrett is the most openly pro-life judicial nominee to the Supreme Court in his lifetime. Quote, "This is an individual," he said of Judge Barrett, "who has been open in her criticism of that illegitimate decision, Roe v. Wade." He was being more honest than most of the talk around here, which says it's only about qualifications. Judge Barrett has proudly fashioned herself in the mold of her mentor, Justice Scalia, who before his death appeared set to declare union fees to be unconstitutional, driving a stake into the heart of the American labor movement. While American workers break their back to make ends meet and earn ever less of ever-growing corporate profits, what might Justice Scalia's former clerk portend for the future of labor rights? What about voting rights? Judge Barrett has suggested that certain rights are civic rights, including voting rights, and can be restrained by the government. But other rights, like the right to keep and bear arms, are individual rights that cannot be subject to even the most common sense restrictions. And of course, what about health care? Judge Barrett has argued that Justice Roberts got it wrong when he upheld the Affordable Care Act. She said that if Justice Roberts read the statute properly, the Supreme Court would have had to invalidate, her words, the law. That's the same thing, by the way, that Donald Trump said about Justice Roberts and the ACA. That's the great and terrible truth about this nomination. Judge Barrett holds far-right views well outside the American mainstream, and those views matter to the vast majority of Americans. They matter to women facing the hardest decision of their lives. They matter to LGBTQ Americans like my daughter, who only 5 years ago won the legal right to marry who she loves and could lose it just as fast. They matter to little girls like 7-year-old Penny Feynman from West Hempstead, Long Island, born with a neurological disorder, bound to a wheelchair, attached to a feeding tube, who is alive today, because of the Affordable Care Act. We're talking about the rights and freedoms of the American people, their right to affordable health care, to make private medical decisions with their doctors, to join a union, to vote without impediment, to marry who they love and not be fired because of who they are. Judge Amy Coney Barrett will decide whether all those rights will be sustained or be curtailed for generations. And based on her views on the issues, not on her qualifications, but her views on the issues, Judge Barrett puts every single one of those fundamental rights, American rights, at risk. So I want to be clear with the American people. The Senate majority, this Republican Senate majority, is breaking faith with you, doing the exact opposite of what it promised 4 years ago, because they wish to cement a majority on the Supreme Court that threatens your fundamental rights. And I want to be very clear with my Republican colleagues. You may win this vote, and Amy Coney Barrett may become the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. But you will never, never get your credibility back. And the next time the American people give Democrats a majority in this chamber, you will have forfeited the right to tell us how to run that
Which
majority.
will get votes too. We'll
Two
get
stops.
points.
You may
Two
win
stops.
this vote, but in the
Two
process,
stops?
you will speed the precipitous decline of faith in our institution, our
Wait,
politics,
no,
the
chicken.
Senate,
This-
5
and
days, 3
the Supreme
stops.
Court.
5 days. Listen to me.
You will give an
Flagstaff,
already divided and
Albuquerque,
angry nation
El Paso, Austin.
a fresh outrage.
Those are the cities.
Well,
It's a
okay,
6-hour
that is
drive.
3
in
stops
this
then
chamber.
before.
Flagstaff.
Wait, is
Albuquerque,
Dallas on its way?
very long
Is
time.
Dallas? Isn't Dallas on its way?
To heal. You walk a perilous road. I know that you think that this will eventually blow over, but you're wrong. The American people will never forget this blatant act of bad faith. They will never forget your complete disregard for their voices, for the people standing online right now and voting their choice, not your choice. They will never forget the lack of consistency, honor, decency, fairness, and principle. They will never forget the rights that are limited, constrained, or taken away by a far-right majority on the Supreme Court. And history will record that by brute political force, in contradiction to its stated principles, this Republican majority confirmed a lifetime appointment on the eve of an election. A justice who will alter the lives and freedoms of the American people while they stood in line to vote. Leader McConnell has lectured the Senate before on consequences of a majority's action. You'll regret this, he told Democrats once, and you may regret this a lot sooner than you think. Listen to those words. You'll regret this, and you may regret it a lot sooner than you think. I would change just one word. My colleagues may regret this for a lot longer than they think. Here, at this late hour, at the end of this sordid chapter in the history of the Senate, the history of the Supreme Court, my deepest and greatest sadness is for the American people. Generations yet unborn will suffer the consequences of this nomination. As the globe gets warmer,
We will be right back.
continue to fall behind.
Protests are breaking out now across America. We will be back with more coverage in just a few